In this video, we're going to go through the AI System Model and Impact Assessment Register. This is a key piece of any company's ISO 42001 compliant AI management system and addresses a lot of different requirements from the standard. So you can see some of them listed here. Clause 6.1.4 requires organizations to conduct AI impact assessments. And then clause 8.4 requires documentation of those impact assessments. And then Annex A has a series of controls related to AI systems, which in my opinion is pretty overlapping with some of the clause 4 through 10 requirements of ISO 42001. So the way StackAware addresses this is through this concept of AI system model and impact assessments. So I'll go through those in this video and explain how that works in an applied manner. So before we get into that, there are a couple of items to address up front. And the first thing is the AI governance standard. So this is a series of requirements for a company when it is building or using AI systems. So many of the ISO 42001 Annex A controls requires establishing standards for certain categories or aspects of AI systems. We'll get into those in a moment. So what the AI governance standard does is it lays out 3 categories of AI systems, and they are those that process public data, those that process confidential data, and those that we consider to be high risk. And high risk systems are defined by these categories here. They're cyber physical systems, anything that's specifically regulated by governmental authority. So anything that is high risk under the EU AI Act, anything that is a high risk AI system according to Colorado SB 205, those would be high risk systems. And then if it meets the organization's AI impact assessment criteria, that would also make it high risk, or if it's otherwise designated by the Chief Information Security Officer or whoever the company appoints to make those types of decisions. And in any case where a system meets any of the criterion for the next highest tier or for the highest tier, it will be automatically classified there. So for example, if you have a cyber physical system like an autonomous vehicle that is only processing public data that is not confidential in any way, but it is still a cyber physical system, so it would be treated as high risk under the AI governance standard. And we'll talk through how this works in detail in the model, system, and impact assessments. The next thing to talk about are the life cycle stages. So these are modeled on ISO 5338, which lays out guidance for building an AI system lifecycle. And these are the phases through which a system will move as it is being used by an organization, developed, and then eventually retired. So these are pretty self-explanatory, and the AI governance standard will specify certain requirements for certain systems at certain stages of the life cycle. And this is required by some Annex A controls. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the model assessment. So what you can see here is the first 3 dark blue columns. These correspond to the categories of AI systems described in the AI governance standard. And these move across the entire range of requirements that we'll discuss. You've got a couple of columns here. You've got the asset number. This is just a system generated number for a given asset. The supplier, self-explanatory, the asset name, and then the lifecycle stage that it is in. So these apply to both systems and models. Right now, we're just looking at AI models. So models would be inert. Essentially, they require supporting infrastructure to do anything, but they're worth examining for a variety of characteristics. So without going into detail on every single one, we will pick an example here. So For algorithm types, we need to evaluate that against our information that we have available on the given algorithm. So for a public, an AI model that's processing public data, it can be undocumented or entirely black box because it's not really sensitive and it also doesn't fall into the high risk category. If we're processing confidential data with this algorithm, then we need to know the general type of algorithm that is processing this data and disclosure of any third parties involved in the hosting or development of it for confidentiality reasons. And then for a high risk AI model, we need to know a detailed description of the algorithm type and as well as those disclosures for third parties. In the light blue text we have here, this is a specific model. This is Gemini 2.0 Flash, and this is all based on publicly available information. And what we've done is evaluated this model against the AI governance standard, as well as looking at the specific Annex A controls that are applicable to this specific category, this specific aspect of the AI model assessment. So the evaluating algorithm types corresponds to Annex A controls 4.4, 6.2.3, and 4.2. And just for reference, those are, I know 4.2 is resource documentation and 4.4 is tooling resources, and then 6.2.3 is documentation of AI system design and development. So these are pretty overlapping controls required by ISO 42001, and we've wrapped them into a single method of evaluating an AI model just to simplify things and prevent duplication. And then we evaluate the model based on the information we have against the AI governance standard. And if it falls below that standard, then that becomes a risk that needs to be logged in a risk register and be treated as per our risk treatment process, as well as per our risk criteria. Okay, so I'm going to move over to the AI system assessment. And this has a similar structure, but this is focused on AI systems. So not models. These are systems where the models are being run in, in an operating environment. They have infrastructure behind them. So for example, Google Workplace Business Standard is an AI system because it includes the Gemini capability, leveraging, for example, the Gemini 2.0 Flash model. So the requirements for AI system assessments are slightly different. We need to look at things like intended purpose and criticality, complexity, reliability, observability, logging, monitoring, a whole host of things that are detailed here in terms of these standards. And as you can see, I mentioned that specific system lifecycle stages for some of these requirements are detailed in the AI governance standard. And then also up top, you can see the relevant Annex A controls for this category of the AI system assessment. And you can see it's quite extensive, and not every category has requirements, but most of them do. And these are the ways in which the organization evaluates an AI system against its criteria to determine if a risk exists and whether or not a system is meeting the requirements of the specific Annex A controls. So these are system assessments. Finally, we have AI impact assessments. Now here you'll notice that there is no AI standard. That's mainly because there is no requirement in ISO 42001 to specifically delineate what your what your criteria are for when it comes to impacts. It's actually quite flexible and broad in that it allows you to say that, based on our assessment, it has the system has these positive impacts, these negative impacts, and it's really up to you to determine how you're going to evaluate systems based on their impact. So there is no AI governance standard for impact assessments. With that said, in your risk criteria, you should define what are unacceptable impacts to society. So for example, Acceleration of misinformation might be an unacceptable impact. A net negative impact to human lifespan as a result of deploying an AI system might be an unacceptable impact. So if you were to identify such an impact from your use of AI systems, then that would create a risk requiring treatment, and that would meet the the clause 6.1.4 requirement to incorporate your AI impact assessments into your risk assessments. So here we have several categories of impact assessment categorizations, and these are things that are required mainly by Annex A.5 in the ISO 42001 standard. So those are AI impact assessments. And just to close out the register, there is a references section. So anytime there is any sort of reference ID used in this document, you'll see, yes, right here. So for example, reference ID, that corresponds to the relevant reference in this table. And that allows you to pull the thread and figure out where this information came from. And then under the assumptions tab, this is if you've made any assumptions about why, or how systems are operating or what systems are in use. And this is just a good way to document what you know and why you, or if you think you know something, this is why you think that it is the case. All right, so that is the AI system model and impact assessment register, which will help you to meet a variety of requirements for ISO 42001, including AI impact assessments, but a whole lot more.